everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Scott Mance, and I am super honored and excited to be hosting this edition of Half Hour with Fallout. New series streaming right now on Amazon Prime, and it is an excellent, excellent, excellent show. I'm so excited to be hosting and moderating this conversation with showrunners, writers, and executive producers Geneva Robertson-Dworet and Graham Wagner. Congrats to both, and welcome to Half Hour With.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of this excellent series, can you just give us a big overview of what is at stake here at Fallout? Geneva, let's start with you.
Well, it's obviously set in the post-apocalyptic world, like the iconic video games. And what is at stake? We have different things at stake for our different characters, but I think for Graham and I, at a very fundamental level, it all came down to family. Lucy is, of course, looking for a missing family member. Rule is ultimately, we learn, looking for family, and Maximus is also looking for a home. So that to us is the stakes and the urgency for our characters.
Well, that is the tip of the iceberg, and boy, does the series go deep and go off in so many different directions, which really tie up into the final episode. But for right now, let's take a look at Fallout.
The mission of the vaults should be important to everyone. To come up to the surface one day and restart civilization. Can you tell me what's happened in the last 200 years?
Holy shit. You're an actual vault dweller.
I am.
I thought all you dipshits were dead. What you're doing is insane.
I don't set the world.
It isn't like the vault out there. It's big.
Higher. I just want to start.
I've had a rough week. Practically every person I've met up here has tried to kill me.
I'm simply going to harvest your organs.
You need to go home. You come from a world of rules, of laws. You should not be alone.
Why did you join the Brotherhood?
To hurt the people who hurt me.
People are going to come after you.
Ain't much stage cleanup here, Volty. Well, now that is a very small drop in a very, very large bucket of drugs. You look out at this wasteland, looks like chaos, but there's always somebody behind the wheel.
Everyone wants to save the world. They disagree on how.
There you are, you little killer.
Wow, that is really just the tip of the iceberg. And Graham, I want to ask, so this is based on an extremely popular video game series. What appealed to you? What made you all go, this is going to make for a great television series? What were your entry points for that?
Well, I mean, we both played the games a lot. I psychotically was playing the game since 1997. To me, Fallout is a world, not a story. There is a story behind the world, of course, which is interesting, but the amount of freedom that Fallout sort of presents as a landscape to set a story inside of is almost infinite. It's such a big world, and also it's a world that comes with a really specific tone, a tone that Geneva and I have been looking for something to work on together for a while. Geneva comes from like big action productions like Captain Marvel, and I come from what I call boutique television, little half hours, and blending these things felt like kind of subversive in its own way. And the cool thing was that Fallout had been doing it for a long time before Geneva and I even thought about working together. So it just felt like a perfect match for what we wanted to do, and the freedom inside that space to discover new things we want to do.
So Geneva, I watch a lot of TV and a lot of film, and there is a lot of content out there. And I got to say, Fallout is really unlike anything I've ever seen in terms of the way it pushes the boundaries. So I would love to hear about your collaboration, you and Graham, how you collaborated with Jonathan Nolan, who, in addition to executive producing, also directed the first 3 episodes, and also Lisa Joy. How did those first conversations about how to push the boundaries of the show?
Well, we had a great collaboration with Jonah, and we were lucky, yes, very lucky to have him as our director on the first 3 episodes. The way it kind of came about was it was during COVID, so no one really got to hang out in the room together, which was a bummer. That would have been fun. But we had a great, and I remember, initial chat with Jonah when we were first starting to talk about it. And I think what's wonderful about Jonah is that he is, of course, a brilliant writer himself, and he really trusts writers really empowered us to feel like we could play with any aspect of the Fallout sandbox that we wanted to. He did, I remember, raise in that very early meeting, like that he thought the best way to pay homage to the games would be to start with at least one aspect of the pilot being that a vault dweller is leaving the vault. And so Graham and I went off, and we sort of springboarded from there. We were very inspired by The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Not, obviously we don't pretend to be as approaching anything like the greatness of that film, but we were very inspired by the idea of 3 interconnected storylines and characters, because we thought it would be a great way to use character as a way to let us into the different worlds of Fallout. Fallout is, of course, many factions. It's very sprawling. And the relationship between the factions is very much what the games are all about. So we thought, like, okay, if we have one character from each of the sort of what we think of as main factions, that would be very helpful, which is, of course, a vault dweller, a member of the Brotherhood of Steel, and a wastelander who we felt like could best be embodied by the sort of the sad plight of the ghouls with our ghoul character. So that was really what inspired us.
Well, I got to say, the production design of the show, the way that it mixes like the sort of retro 50s feel, especially like with the music and like the furniture and everything, with this post-apocalyptic look, but also it's a blend of visceral action, for sure, visceral action, but also dark humor. So Graham, you got a lot of balances going on there in terms of the production design, the look of the show, and of course the entertainment value of it. What were the biggest challenges to blend so much, to hit the right tone?
Part of me wonders if we actually blended them at all, in terms of that, we have these scenes that are incredibly horrific and horrible, and then we have scenes right next to it that are decidedly silly. To speak to the production design, I feel very strongly that a script is a script. There's a lot of great scripts around the city. It's the people that stand it up and do all the work and figure out every little corner. And we're so lucky to have so many great people just doing things that I don't think nothing against the shows I've worked on. I've never seen so much work go into a script I'd worked on in my life before. Especially for the silly things, to have Stuart Dryburgh, the DP from The Piano, filming a scene about a man who's abusing chickens. It was really surreal and fun to me. It felt like all we have to do is be a little weird, but it's being filmed like the most prestige show of all time. To me, that was endlessly delightful.
Well, in terms of that's behind the camera, certainly, like everybody like bringing their A game, that goes for in front of the camera as well. With regards to Walton and Ella and Aaron and Kyle, like everyone in this cast. So Geneva, like talk about like, getting the perfect Lucy, the perfect Cooper, like how did that come together? And what was it like for you to see it all these actors elevate each other?
Yeah, they certainly did. They were incredible, collaborating with each other and riffing on each other. Walton was the only actor that we kind of cast in our minds ahead of time. That was very early on, and when Graham and I were chatting about the show, that we both were huge admirers of his. I've worked with him before. He can do comedy and drama, so he can do what the show is trying to merge with Graham and I's sort of sensibilities. And so we actually wrote the role of the ghoul / Cooper Howard for him specifically, which we now laugh at because we were like, wow, that was really stupid. What if we hadn't gotten Walton Goggins? Like, I'm not available. And then we honestly looked at many people for Lucy and for Maximus. Ella and Aaron, just stood out of the pack as just the perfect people for each character. Aaron, has this incredible Juilliard training and is just a very, technically sophisticated actor who can do anything. And I think Ella absolutely is someone who can nail both the comedy and the drama like Walton can. But she also has this incredible relentlessness that Lucy has, right? Ella is like a very heroic person in real life. Like, you feel like she's the person, who's going to survive the actual apocalypse. And we needed that because, we really put her through the ringer in this terms of this production. She was in very physically demanding scenes for months at a time. The schedule, I remember looking at the call sheet and just being like, Jesus, like she's getting up at 2:30 in the morning, shooting until the evening. This is a brutal schedule for an actor. And she, despite that, just brought it every single day. We were so lucky.
Well, let's take a look right now at a scene from Fallout. And this is the scene that really gets the whole shebang going.
All right. I think that's everything.
Why wouldn't you do it? The thumbs up.
Oh, it's grown-up stuff. Well, back when I was in the Marines, they taught us that if they ever drop a really big bomb, they told us to hold up your thumb just like this. And if the cloud is smaller than your thumb, now you run for the hills.
And if it's bigger than your thumb?
They told us not to bother running.
Do you think it's gonna happen?
I certainly hope not. But us cowpokes, we take it as it comes, right?
Can I have a slice, Dad?
Well, let me see if I can't rustle you up a piece.
All right, one piece of cake coming up from my favorite cowgirl.
Is it your thumb or mine?
With that,
Yeah.
everything after that, hold on to your butts, folks. I'll tell you. Geneva, you mentioned how, for Ella, and I'm sure for the rest of the cast, it was a grueling shoot. So you talked before about how Ella really had to, get up early and stay late, it was a really grueling shoot. Can you talk about the kind of training and the preparation that the cast had to go through, particularly, Walton and Ella and Aaron, because it was such a physically demanding shoot?
I think, probably other than Ella, the next biggest physically, the biggest physical demand was on Walton Goggins with the ghoul makeup. That makeup was, is, I think, stunning. It's an amazing piece of work from the great Vincent van Dyke, and Jake Garber collaborated on it. But Walton had to get up very early as well and put on this makeup that, was very uncomfortable at times to wear, especially we shot in some very hot weather. And when that was the case, it's like he's wearing 20 layers of cellophane on his skin and then standing out in direct sunlight in a 100-degree day. And that's like really just brutal for an actor. And there were moments where you could he was almost like sweating his makeup off. He is an extraordinary actor and that he brings a level of commitment that you rarely see. You know, I remember the very first makeup test we did about 4 months before we actually had to start shooting, and he already knew his lines, like from the scripts he had been given, and that was 4 months ahead, which seemed like I was amazed. But that's Walton.
Wow, that's amazing.
Another aspect of that story, I don't know if he told the story on, I don't know if it was Kimmel, about how he was bitten by a brown recluse spider on the first day of his makeup test. But it was my first encounter with the ghoul, not Walton, the ghoul. And he was telling me this story as about a spider bite, but I'm looking at a sort of a zombie man telling me about, like, it's the craziest thing, man. I got to go to the hospital. And he's an actor, works, once the makeup is on, the voice comes. And so I was talking to the ghoul about being bit by a brown recluse spider in his nether regions. And it was another very surreal moment in the entire production for me, but yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the exterior shots and filming and the kind of weather you had, but that takes me to a bigger question. And with all the shows that you have collectively worked on, what were, Geneva, let me start with you on this. What were some of the unique challenges, the daunting challenges that you faced with Fallout that you didn't have to face with the other shows you worked on?
Well, one thing that's funny actually about, this was my first show. I've never worked in TV before. So I come from feature film writing. And so one thing about feature film writers is, while I was always very busy and working, as a studio feature writer, you're writing drafts, but you're not part of production or post. I think that's a common misconception that's out there among audiences, is that somehow the screenwriters are like sticking around on feature film, because that's how TV works sometimes. But that's not how it works at all. So I was very new to production. Everything seemed like fascinatingly challenging and interesting to me. I would say that's more of a question that you should ask Graham, as someone who actually came from production, or Jonah, who often said that this was the hardest shoot he'd ever done, and that was coming off of Westworld and Person of Interest. There were enormous challenges to creating the monsters, to, of course, creating a post-apocalyptic world. But I think one thing that I really enjoyed about the whole thing was that it was a very adventurous approach to filmmaking that Jonah encouraged. He took this production all over the world, and that was really his impetus, was that we went to, Namibia, and Utah and New York, and we shot everywhere. So it just felt like, this was a globe-trotting set of filmmakers, and I think that level of scale and epic scope is what you can see on screen.
Absolutely. Graham, that's your cue.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, not to throw other shows that I've worked on under the bus, but I felt like I was like a top tier builder of dog houses who was like, now do a skyscraper. And I really did, the great thing about working with Jonah is that he's present company excluded, a lightning rod for great talent. So we got the very best stunts guy. We got the very best production designer. We got the best VisFX teams from around the world were contributing. I mean, this is the guy who got Anthony Hopkins to do a TV show. You know what I mean? So he sort of did that again, and he does it behind the scenes as well.
Well, I got to say, the payoff I'm not going to spoil anything, but by the time you get to the final episode, I mean, the payoff, everything that happens in this final episode is so earned. It's so devastating. Just watching that last episode, I was like, oh my gosh. But from the moment Fallout dropped on Prime, everyone was raving about it. And especially now that they've had a chance to watch all 8 episodes, and I know you're already working on season 2, which is excellent news. But Geneva, why do you think people are just like responding so strongly to Fallout? Like, what's the takeaway for you as a showrunner to like see, especially because it's your first like show that you've run, to see such an amazing reaction? Like, why do you think that is?
Well, no, I'm incredibly grateful. I'm especially incredibly relieved that the gamers feel like, or at least, enough of them feel like we did justice to something that has meant so much to them as well. This has been 4 years of our lives, kind of all day, every day. So it's very important to us that they feel like we properly honored the thing we all love. So that's been very gratifying. I think, in terms of general audiences, often when I worked on studio features earlier in my career, I felt like there was sort of a sort of staleness to a lot of sci-fi and sort of the tone that studios were looking for in their sci-fi projects. And that was the reason, Graham and I are old friends. Like he said, we really wanted to collaborate together for a long time. And part of that was just because I wanted to hang out with Graham all day, because that seems like it would be super fun. But it was also because I felt like he would bring the thing to the sci-fi that is the space that I have worked in for my whole career, that would help make it really fresh and special. So it was really, to me, it's been really just an incredibly gratifying collaboration, where, I just think I enjoy when sci-fi doesn't take itself super seriously, and has a sense of humor and sort of is surprising and weird. And it's been wonderful to see things like Dune that I think go for it in that way. And that's awesome. And hopefully maybe people are connecting with our show for the same reason, but I don't know, I guess you'd have to ask audiences. I hate to presume why they like our show.
Well, that's a great correlation to Dune, and I think that Fallout definitely really goes for it in the same way, but with completely different results. Graham, what's your take on the reaction? And more to the point here is, because it's genre, because it's sci-fi, I think sci-fi is subjective, and so is all art. But are there some reactions, Graham, that you read or heard that surprised even you?
I mean, just the fact that so many hardcore fans of the games have opted to embrace the show. I'm like a record store snob who doesn't like some band's new album just because I'm a contrarian. I totally get that. And the sort of what felt like a collective decision to be like, no, we accept you, was I was kind of surprised by that. And also the fact that people who didn't play the games were interested as well. I was sort of, all delightful. And if I had to put a name on why the show is resonating or seems to be resonating, I wonder if, well, we are in an era where I don't want to say the apocalypse is nigh, but the discourse, we seem to like to talk about it as though it is, because we're getting every bit of bad news in the world put in front of our faces every day, thanks to the way information travels, that it feels top of mind. But what we've also seen with that, a horrible calamity occurs somewhere around the globe. There are people who make pretty decent jokes about it too. We're not serious about it. Because human beings are inherently unserious creatures. And that feels like we may have captured that like, look, something horrible could happen to America or to planet Earth, and there'd still be silly business. People would still be there'd still be laughs to be had, I think, is the hope.
I gotta say, I was grateful for the levity, and there's a lot of it, but this goes back to what I was trying to get at before in terms of like the balance. I don't think that the humor interferes with the provocative nature of what's at stake, and certainly the visceral action. It's a tough, rope to walk from start to finish, episode 1 to episode 8. But in the midst of all or I'd say after all the levity that you see even, from the first episode to the last, there is a line that resonates, and it resonates because it's exactly what you just said, Graham. War never changes. What was behind that line, Geneva? Do you feel like the series sort of built to that moment?
Yeah, for sure. We it's a line we talked about kind of from day one, because it's the most iconic line from the games, and it's the most iconic. It's the central theme of the games. Is sort of how mankind is destined to keep repeating its destructive nature and destructive path, and how that's sort of both incredibly tragic but almost funny. And so we talked a great deal about how are we going to get to this line that would mean so much to so many people, and who should be the one to say it. That was just an enormous amount of time that we spent on that. Graham, do you want to add anything?
No, yeah, it's definitely, just to be clear, definitely a line we did not write.
Yes,
that is
yes, I should state that too.
Amazon bought the rights to so that we could pretend we had written that. It is a bit of a chestnut, and it can mean so many different things coming out of different mouths. I do think because we really wanted to structure the season around that as sort of, not to be too cheeky about it, but as sort of a mic drop moment, because it just felt like fans were waiting for these words. It's the "I'll be back" of this of Fallout. Yeah. But yeah, I have a feeling we'll be reiterating it going forward as well. We'll see.
Well, I got to say that this is important. Is that I haven't played a video game since I put a quarter in Miss Pac-Man. Okay, that's how far back. But the show stands on its own, regardless of whether you love the game or not. And I just love the show. And getting to that moment when you get there, I'm not going to say who says it or why, but it feel like it just like brings the whole series to the fore. So, with that, Geneva, my last question is, if there's someone who hasn't yet watched it, even though it has been everywhere and people are raving about it, like what is it? What's so special about Fallout to you that you would love for people to know, so that if they haven't seen it, they might want to check it out for themselves after this conversation?
I think there's a couple things. I think it's epic and it's fun. So I hope people watch just for the pleasure of, that goes with watching something of this genre. I think like Graham said, the fact that it's the end of the world with a thumbs up and a sense of cheeky humor is makes it unusual within, you hear post-apocalyptic and you think it's going to be grim as fuck, but I think that's not our show at all. And then lastly, I think, the games are a brilliant critique of corporate monopolies. You explore the wasteland and you're constantly finding the detritus left behind by these mega powerful corporate monopolies that existed before the war. And the implication seems to be that, hey, those mega corporations and the fact that they were these monopolies that were more powerful than the government maybe contributed to the fact that the world ended. So the fact that that's on Amazon Prime, we always thought was delicious.
Well, Graham and Geneva, I want to thank you both for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to join us for this half hour with conversation. I also want to thank our friends at Amazon Prime for making this conversation possible, for making this episode a half hour with possible. So with that, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Half Hour with Fallout. My name is Scott Mantz, and be sure to watch Fallout on Amazon Prime. And if you've seen it already, trust me, a second viewing, repeated viewings are essential. You will get so much more out of it. So happy viewing. Best of luck with season 2, and we will see you next time.